When Modern Family premiered in 2009, it wasn't just another sitcom, it was a quiet revolution disguised as a family comedy. Shot in a mockumentary style and structured around three interconnected households, it looked familiar. It felt easy to love. But beneath the punchlines and pratfalls, the show was laying the groundwork for something far bigger. It was, without question, ahead of its time. Because while network TV had dabbled in diversity before, Modern Family made it feel lived in, real, and never once like a lecture. Instead of presenting LGBTQ+ and blended families as novelties or plot points, the show simply made them the heart of the story. Mitchell and Cameron, two gay men in a committed relationship raising an adopted daughter, weren't just supporting characters. They were family, not in theory, in every frame. And that distinction was seismic. You have to remember the landscape at the time. In 2009, same-sex marriage was still illegal in most of the United States. LGBTQ+ characters existed on television, sure, but often in the margins. Their relationships were either downplayed, over-sexualized, or used for comic relief. But Modern Family gave us Cam and Mitch, two people who loved each other, bickered over furniture, planned birthday parties, worried about parenting, just like everyone else. It normalized what had so often been othered. And it did it with such warmth, such sincerity, that even viewers with no personal experience of LGBTQ+ relationships found themselves rooting for the couple, laughing with them, growing with them. That was the genius. The show didn't ask for tolerance. It created empathy. It didn't frame Mitch and Cam as a lesson. It framed them as a love story. A complicated, hilarious, deeply human love story. Then there was the blended family at the center of it all. Jay Pritchett, the gruff patriarch, married to Gloria, a much younger Colombian woman with a son from a previous relationship. Their dynamic could have easily become a tired stereotype, but the writing was too smart for that. Gloria was vibrant, yes, loud, yes, but she was also wise, maternal, and endlessly loyal. Jay, the old-school dad, learning to navigate a new world, was softened by his love for his new family. And Manny Delgado was the soul of that household. Precocious, poetic, and proudly sensitive, he shattered every expectation of what a sitcom kid could be. Together, these characters showed audiences a vision of family that didn't fit the 1950s mold. And that was the point. Modern Family wasn't just reflecting the world as it was becoming, it was helping shape the way people thought about what a family could be. The show didn't avoid hard topics, it leaned into them. Cultural clashes, generational divides, identity, inclusion, all of it was fair game. But it never felt forced. It felt organic because it was. These were the stories families were already living. They just hadn't seen them on primetime television before, at least not like this. And maybe that's what made Modern Family feel so radical without ever having to shout about it. It didn't wave a flag, it just lived its truth week after week. It didn't beg for applause for being inclusive, it just was, in a way that felt seamless and authentic. That authenticity became its secret weapon, disarming even the most skeptical viewers with humor, heart, and humanity. Take Mitch and Cam's relationship, for instance. It wasn't perfect, and that's what made it so groundbreaking. Their disagreements weren't sanitized for easy consumption. Their personalities clashed, their parenting styles differed, and their insecurities often came to the surface. But that imperfection was real, and in that realness, the show offered something LGBTQ+ representation had often lacked on TV: dimensionality. They were allowed to be flawed, funny, fussy, over the top, and totally in love. They weren't characters designed to educate, they were characters designed to exist. And as they navigated the challenges of raising Lily, a young Vietnamese girl adopted into a white gay household, the show leaned into the complexities of race, identity, and parenting without ever reducing the characters to just their labels. Lily wasn't a prop, she was a growing, evolving person, and her relationship with Mitch and Cam shifted with time, deepened, and often provided some of the show's most tender and vulnerable moments. It wasn't a story about how to be a perfect family. It was a story about how to be a real one. And then there was the show's nuanced portrayal of language and culture through Gloria. She wasn't just a fiery Latina wife trope. She was layered, bold but vulnerable, hilarious but deeply rooted in her values. Her relationship with Jay created endless comedic moments, but also asked real questions about assimilation, compromise, and what it means to preserve your identity in a blended family. The miscommunications were funny, yes, but they were also truthful. And that's what made her such a breakthrough character. You laughed with her, never at her. She wasn't other. She was the emotional glue of her family. Meanwhile, the Dunphys represented a version of family life that was equally progressive in its own quiet way. A marriage that had weathered the test of time, 3 wildly different kids, a mother who was constantly trying to hold it all together, and a dad who led with joy even when he was clueless. It was traditional in some ways, yes, but layered with a modern twist. Claire was the breadwinner. Phil wasn't a punchline. Their partnership was built on mutual respect, even when their approaches clashed. And their kids weren't cookie-cutter sitcom stereotypes. They were weird, smart, rebellious, anxious, awkward, and sometimes totally out of their depth, like most kids. Together, these 3 households formed a constellation of what a modern family could be, and in doing so, the show redefined the boundaries of the genre. It wasn't just about the jokes. It was about who got to tell them, who got to be in the room, who got to matter. By normalizing non-traditional families in such a widely loved primetime format, Modern Family reached homes that might never have otherwise engaged with those stories. Viewers who didn't personally know an LGBTQ+ couple raising a child got to spend time with one every week. Audiences unfamiliar with blended families, cross-cultural marriages, or gender role reversals found themselves invested in characters living those realities. And that exposure, that casual week-to-week, no-big-deal familiarity, that's what moves the needle. The show made space for new kinds of conversations, not in a grand sweeping way, but through tiny laugh-filled moments. And in those moments, walls came down, hearts opened, and a generation grew up knowing that family doesn't have to look one way to be full of love, laughter, and legacy. And as Modern Family continued its run, it didn't settle into routine. It evolved. The kids grew up, the relationships matured, and the show leaned into new realities with the same fearless curiosity it had from the start. It didn't cling to a static idea of family life. It mirrored its natural fluidity. And that's what made it feel alive. Cultural norms were shifting in real time outside the show's world, and Modern Family kept pace. Not as a soapbox, but as a mirror. Cam and Mitch's marriage, once a landmark moment for representation on TV, was no longer unthinkable by the time it happened. It was anticipated, earned, celebrated. When they finally said their vows, it wasn't just another big network moment. It was a culmination of years of quiet groundwork, emotional investment, and narrative honesty. It felt like we had watched a real relationship grow into something lasting. That wedding wasn't just a sweet moment. It was a cultural shift. Millions of viewers, many of whom may never have attended a same-sex wedding in real life, were given a front-row seat to one that was joyful, funny, messy, and filled with love. That visibility mattered. It still matters. Representation isn't just about being seen. It's about being understood. And Modern Family did that without ever breaking its stride or compromising its humor. The show also became a rare example of intergenerational storytelling that worked. You could watch Modern Family as a teenager and relate to Haley's identity crisis, or Alex's perfectionism, or Luke's pure chaotic energy. You could come back to it a decade later as a new parent and suddenly see yourself in Claire's quiet unraveling, or Phil's unshakable optimism. You could be a grandparent like Jay, learning how to grow while still holding onto the values you were raised with. That multi-layered empathy was part of the magic. It didn't try to pick a side between old and new. It found humor in the gap and love in the learning. Jay's character arc in particular was subtle and powerful. Here was a man raised in a different time, suddenly navigating a world where his son was gay, his wife spoke a different language, his stepson wrote poetry, and his grandchildren were nothing like the kids he'd raised. And over time, he adapted, Not with perfection, but with persistence. And that's the key. Modern Family never pretended people change overnight, but it believed they could, that they would if they loved each other enough, that learning and relearning is part of growing, and that families don't thrive because they agree on everything, but because they commit to showing up anyway. It's easy to forget, in the era of streaming saturation, just how rare this kind of storytelling was at the time. Modern Family was appointment television, but it also felt like a safety net. It was the show you turned to after a long day. It was the show you binged with your parents, or introduced to your partner, or played in the background because it made the house feel warmer. It had that unique power to gather people. And gathering, that's what it did best. It gathered stories and people and moments. It gathered families on couches across the world. It gathered hearts. And in that gathering, it quietly helped redefine what normal looked like on screen. By the time Modern Family aired its final episode in 2020, it wasn't just saying goodbye to characters. It was closing the book on an era it helped shape, 11 seasons, over 200 episodes, and countless moments that had embedded themselves into the cultural lexicon. But more than the accolades, the Emmys, the critical acclaim, or the millions of viewers, the show's legacy lies in what it made us feel and what it allowed us to see. It allowed us to see love in all its forms. Not just romantic love, but the chaotic, irritating, self-sacrificing, unconditional kind of love that keeps families tethered, even when everything else is falling apart. It let us see fathers like Phil, who weren't afraid to be goofy, mothers like Claire, who didn't have to be perfect to be powerful, and couples like Mitch and Cam, who weren't just symbols. They were people. It showed us that blended families aren't broken. They're beautiful. That culture clashes can lead to understanding, that parenting is messy, growing older is humbling, and that change, however awkward or scary, is always worth it when love is in the room. And perhaps most importantly, it created a space where people who had never seen themselves on television suddenly did. LGBTQ plus teens saw a future where they could be parents, partners, equals. Immigrant families saw their cultures represented with respect and humor. Kids with unconventional families saw something that felt like home. And the rest of the world? They got to laugh. They got to learn. And many grew without even realizing it. The final scene of Modern Family is deceptively simple. Porch lights being turned off, voices fading into silence, a home being locked for the last time. But what lingered after that screen went dark wasn't the quiet. It was the echo of laughter shared, of walls broken, of norms rewritten. In the end, Modern Family didn't just change TV, it changed the conversation. It opened the door wider. It reminded us that family, however it looks, wherever it's from, whoever's in it, is the most modern thing of all when it's rooted in love. That is why Modern Family will forever be regarded not just as one of the greatest sitcoms in history, but one of the most important. It didn't follow the formula, it rewrote it, and in doing so, it made room for the rest of us. That's the kind of legacy that never fades. That's the kind of story that will always be worth telling.
Really? Those shoes? Do you know how much walking you have to do at Disneyland?
I like wearing the high heels, I'm fine.
It's just like that jacket you refuse to bring when I say take a jacket. Don't tell me what to do, I'm fine. You're cold and shivering, and I look like the jerk who won't give his wife a jacket. So I do. And then I'm cold and shivering. And I brought a jacket.
Are you done with your boring jacket story? Because we're going to hit traffic.
Tell you one thing, I'm not going to give you my shoes. Why are you walking around in pain? Just admit the shoes were a bad idea.
I am not in pain.
Okay, my bad.
I'm fine. You just try to keep up with us.
I can't take this. Gloria, sit down for a second.
I'm fine, Jay.
Please, you may not be in pain.
I cannot walk around in public with these things. They're so yellow and so ugly. And they're so softy and so comfortable, Jay. What is this?